This is my Remington 597 22LR semi-automatic rifle. I'll be doing some shooting with it, and I'll be taking down the action so you can see how it operates, and just a basic review. This rifle is completely factory standard. The only thing that I've done to it is mount this Leapers 3-9x50 scope, and I've also removed the rear iron sights to enable me to mount that scope. As you can see, I've just mounted the scope on the standard dovetail system, which was milled into the receiver from the factory. This mount is a bit different from other mounts. It's a Leapers one-piece integral mount, and what makes it different is that it has an integral stop pin which screws down through the base of the mount into a hole in the receiver, and that ensures that it remains solid. It's not going to edge forward or backward, which it shouldn't do anyway if you've tightened up these screws properly, but it just is a precautionary measure, keeping things good and stable. This receiver had 3 screw holes already in it. If you wanted to purchase a weaver base, you could use those screw holes to attach the weaver base. So it worked out quite well, because this mount, the screw that goes through the base of this mount actually entered one of those holes existing in the receiver, so it worked out very nicely. I've had this rifle for just over a year. I've put bricks of ammunition through it, thousands and thousands of rounds, and my opinion of this rifle is very high. Accuracy out of the box is excellent. You can expect to get half-inch groups at 50 meters if you use good quality ammunition and do your part with shooting. I'm very impressed with the accuracy. The action I'm also very impressed with. It will cycle reliably. I would expect to go through a brick of CCI standard velocities without any problems. If I did get a problem, I'd be quite surprised. I've also put bricks of Federal 525 ammunition through it. That can be more hit and miss. I've had bricks of Federal which have performed superbly, very nicely with minimal jams, but then I've had other bricks which have obviously been a different batch, and they've performed a bit hit and miss. You can have good runs with it, and then you can have a few jams. But overall, this action is very reliable. It will function with CCI subsonics perfectly. It has the 3rd generation metal alloy magazines. The first Remingtons came out with a plastic magazine, and some people had jamming issues with problems feeding from that magazine. Also, some people have jamming issues through over tightening the guide rods, and I'll look at that when I take down the action. There are just 2 takedown screws in the stock, just the basic safety behind the trigger. It also has a last shot hold open feature, which I find very handy. So if the magazine is empty, the bolt will hold in a rearward position. It's excellent for safety as well, because you can actually activate the hold open feature through the mag well. If you haven't got a magazine in there, you can just lock the bolt back and everyone can see that it's clear. Now to disassemble the rifle. Start by checking the chamber, making sure it's clear. Remove the magazine. The 2 screws, takedown screws, are Allen screws, so you'll need an Allen wrench to undo them. The action just lifts straight out of the stock. There's a single pin holding in the trigger unit, so just drive that out, and the trigger unit will just rotate out of the action. As you can see, there are 2 guide rods which the bolt slides back and forward on, and these are held in by 2 small Allen screws at the rear of the receiver, so you will need another size Allen wrench to undo those. The bolt handle simply pulls straight out. To remove the guide rods, just cycle the bolt rearward, and that will cause the guide rods to protrude from the rear. And you watch the spring so you don't lose them. The bolt just comes straight out. Extractor. Reassembly can be a little tricky at first, but as you get used to it, it's fairly straightforward and it's no real trouble. Make sure the extractor and the bolt is in the extractor slot. Just insert the guide rods a short distance into the receiver. You may have to compress the recoil spring to enable the guide rod to be pushed forward properly. I just use my fingernail. You don't want to over tighten these screws. Apparently it can lead to cycling issues, so what you do is just tighten it fully to make sure the guide rod is fully seated forward into the recesses near the chamber, and then loosen it off and then just finger tighten it back until you've met the resistance. The only lube I use in this action is it's a dry lube. It's got Teflon in it. You don't want to use any oil really in this sort of action. You want to keep it as dry as possible, and I just find that this Teflon spray-on lube works really well, and that's all I use in there. I just spray it on the guide rods, the recesses in the bolt where the guide rods travel. And yeah, that's all it needs really. Oil attracts all the carbon and gunk and dust and rubbish. It's basically a magnet to that sort of thing, and it will just gunk up the action, so I steer clear of it myself. The short screw goes at the front. I always hold the bolt back slightly when pulling the trigger, just to ensure the firing pin isn't going to hit the edge of the barrel.